Welcome back to the MSU Deer Labs online seminar series. It is brought to you by the Mississippi State University Extension Service as well as the MSU Forest and Wildlife Research Center. I will be your presenter today. My name is Bronson Strickland, and I want to acknowledge my colleague and the co-director of the MSU Deer Lab, Steve Damaris. As the name implies, this presentation is all about cool season food plots. Want to review everything more or less that we've learned over the past 10 or 15 years. Want to go over the most common forages, their nutrient profiles, which plants work well, which ones work well in mixes, and which ones deer are attracted to. When we're finished with the presentation, my goal is that you are going to feel completely equipped to know what to plant on your property and why. By no means is this every possible thing you could write about or talk about with cool season food plots, but I think it's a really good collection, certainly for people starting out to get you going. For the next group of slides, I want to review what I would call best management practices. Things about your location, different planting techniques, and things like that. If you did not see my other presentation, which was food plot principles, that presentation was largely devoted to these types of topics. So if you haven't seen that one, you may want to check it out. I'm going to do a brief review of some of those best management practices. Just wanted to bring this to your attention, especially if this is the first time you've planted a plot in a given area. Just because that area is dry in, say, September or October does not mean it's going to be dry in November and December. You can get a lot of information online from different soil maps to see the elevation and places that may hold water. And there are, which we'll talk about later, there are some forages that can tolerate damp soils better than others, but there are none that are going to grow well or grow at all with the type of water level you see here for any extended period of time. How big should a plot be? The shape of a plot? Are any of those any better than others? Well, it all depends on your objective. If your number one priority is forage production, then typically bigger is better. Larger area, more hours of sunlight on the field is going to benefit you from a plant growth perspective and biomass production. Now, if your objective is you want to see more deer and you're not really as concerned about forage production, it needs to be attractive so deer come to it. But in that case, you can get by with a much smaller plot. Also keep in mind how close is cover is going to have a big impact. So if it is exclusively a hunting plot, you probably want to make sure it is fairly close to cover so that deer will be near the plot and come to it and arrive on that plot if you're hunting in the afternoon before dark. So there is really no one size fits all for size and shape. It just depends on what you want out of the food plot. Here's a good example of a hunting plot. We're going to get and did good growth production out of this plot. Definitely generated a lot of forage, however not as much if it were a larger plot. So notice there is cover adjacent to the plot. The deer used it. Deer were seen at this plot, so it was very successful from that standpoint. But when I show you the next slide, you'll see what some of the limitations were. Okay, as you can see, the limitation was sunlight. So this plot was still successful in terms of it generated or grew enough forage to attract deer. And so it was very successful from a hunting perspective, but you'll never in this scenario get the type of biomass production that you would get in a larger, more open plot. I know. Many of you are rolling your eyes right now. I'm going to talk about soil testing. I work for the Extension Service, and it seems like us Extension people, we do this a lot, but it is probably the cheapest insurance you're going to have with a food plot by getting a soil sample and seeing what nutrients are available in the soil, seeing what deficiencies there are, and being able to address that. Regardless of where you're at, this charge is very reasonable. It's usually somewhere around $6 to $8, maybe $10. It's something you really only need to do every 2 to 3 years. So that is some of the best money you will spend on your food plot, is getting a soil test. And here is a really good example. More than likely, this is an extreme example. There have been many food plots that have been planted and have been successful or somewhat successful without taking a soil test, but this is an example where adding no soil amendments at all, for the most part, doomed this particular planting. If it were a different forage, maybe we could have had a successful plot, but with this particular clover at this spot, you can see the difference side by side, planted the exact same way, same seeding rate, timed the same, everything was the same. One got amendments and one did not, so it can make a big difference. We have a publication that goes along with this. If you ever want to learn more about the different types of lime and their application, if you see this web link at the bottom, we've got a nice little chart of how you can work those numbers out and figure out what's the best lime product for your situation.